Hello, friends. Welcome to the LeggLife podcast. My name is Adam.
My name is Sherry.
Sherry Beth, what episode number is this?
12.
We have made it to a baker's dozen.
No.
No?
Just regular dozen.
A good old-fashioned regular dozen. Clearly, I don't know what a baker's dozen is.
No, it's 13.
Okay, well, next week. So next week will be the first time that I get to say we made it to a baker's
Yes.
dozen and actually get it correct.
Correct, yeah.
So today, we are going to talk about one of our very favorite topics ever. Mm-hmm. We're talking about travel.
Yeah.
So I obviously just got back from a trip.
Yep.
And you, unfortunately, did not.
I traveled from my living room chair to the kitchen to get food and then back to my chair.
Yeah, but which honestly is the most travel you've done in months.
Correct.
So
right.
technically, you've been traveling a ton lately. You've been traveling a lot more than you used to.
That's it.
That's it. But one of the things that kind of, how would I say this? One of the things that stood out to me on this trip was just a reminder of how much I love to travel. Mm-hmm. Just about how, oh, this is one of my very favorite things to do. And obviously the world, fingers crossed, seems to be opening a little bit. Mm-hmm. It seems like there's things that have been closed for a year, and there's a little bit of a normal that is starting to happen.
Yep.
So we've been getting some questions about Adam and Sherry. Like,
when are you going to travel again?
When are you going to travel again? Like, what are you guys thinking about all this? And we haven't really addressed it, at least in depth. And so we thought, you know what? Maybe this would be a good podcast episode.
I think so, yeah.
So today we're talking all about travel. We're going to talk about kind of things we've missed about travel. We're going to talk about sort of our comfort around travel in this changed world.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about how travel for us might look different, right? Like, I mean, the way we traveled in the past might not be the way we travel over the next season.
Right.
And then we're going to talk about just kind of practically, when are some thoughts that we're having about when we might hit the road and where we might go and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Sound good?
Yeah.
Ready to jump into this?
Yeah.
Sherry Beth, let's talk about things we've missed about traveling. For you.
Yeah.
What have you missed the most?
So my favorite part about traveling is just getting to see new things. Mm-hmm. We live in a great big wide world, and we are fortunate enough to live in one of the most beautiful places in that great big wide world.
Yeah.
But there is still a lot of world out there, and I just love being able to experience different things, see different things, meet different people, kind of experience different cultures. Like, I just love that. So that is what I miss about traveling.
That's pretty much the same thing that I miss as well. I miss the kind of unexpected gems that you find when traveling. Mm-hmm. We'll talk a little bit about this later about how we travel. But you and I have always been pretty good about, the back roads, right? And, not going where everybody else always goes.
Right.
And
we kind of seek out the hole-in-the-wall places.
Yeah, completely. Little things that are of interest to us, even if they might not be on any, TripAdvisor or Yelp list.
Right.
Right? It's something that we would enjoy.
Yeah.
And I love finding those little gems in the most unexpected places. I think for me, the most recent example was my trip to Melbourne, Florida. That's not a town that ever would have been on my list. Right. Right? You know what I mean? In the whole world, why would I want to go there? There was nothing that excited me about that place.
Right.
But now...
Going.
Well, yeah, going.
On your way there, you were like, eh.
Totally.
But now
I'm I would go back.
Right.
And there were so many, unexpected things. We had an event the very first morning. I didn't vlog this. And I don't even know if I told you about this. It was at this place called the Warbird Museum. And it was an aviation museum that was filled with all of these old, military jets and planes. And so there's a Navy Blue Angels jet. Literally, I'm standing right next to it.
Oh, wow.
And there's all of these old World War II and warbirds. And just and then they have this hangar that's restoring these old planes as well.
Wow. No, you did not tell me about this.
I never knew that existed.
Right.
I never would have known that there was this amazing warbird museum in, I think that was technically in Titusville, Florida. But, the Brevard County Zoo never was on my list.
Right.
All of these little things that you discover along the way. And I think that that's the thing I miss most about travel, is that travel for us really is about the journey, not necessarily the destination. Mm-hmm. And I miss the journey. I miss all of the unexpected little great breweries and restaurants and mom and pop shops and museums.
The little bookstores and the little gift shops, all these tiny little things that you just sort of stumble upon.
Yes.
Those are always the best memories for us, I think.
Without a doubt. Yeah, I completely agree. So that's what we miss about traveling. But now, Sherry, let's talk a little bit about the comfort around traveling.
Right now.
And you and I are different. And here's what I want to say: we're recording this podcast in March of 2021.
Yeah.
And so the world may change quickly.
Right.
Right. And so we're not necessarily even saying where we would travel today. I think we're thinking of possibly over the next season. Right.
Yeah.
So kind of comfort where we are, comfort where we're going, that sort of stuff. And you and I feel a little bit different about this.
Yeah. So for me, I've never been a big fan of crowds.
Yeah.
Even pre-COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, the thought of going to a big city where there's going to be millions of people sounds terrible to me.
Yeah.
I'm just not comfortable in crowds, and kind of ever, but like especially now.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, like my comfort level of travel is wholly dependent on where we are going
And what we're going to do.
Okay. And the purpose of that trip.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I mean, that's where I'm at. I don't want to plan our travel to these big destinations that a bunch of other people are going to be at.
That was one of the things that I read an article, and this was, gosh, I think it was sometime late last year. They were looking forward at what travel might look like in the next few years. And they were saying that historically popular travel destinations like Paris and London and New York City, like big cities with lots of people, like filled streets, like theaters and crowds, those might not be where people are wanting to go for the next few years. Where they're wanting to go are places like Alaska with a lot of open space, right? And like more rural experiences and just places where they can still travel and still have these experiences just away from these crowds of people. So that's kind of where you're at?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like I would be okay going to like a small town and kind of hanging out for a weekend and kind of seeing like where, these little hole-in-the-wall places are, but I don't think I'd be comfortable going to like New York City.
Okay, that's fair. I think my comfort around travel, I probably am I definitely am more comfortable about it. I think that one of the things that's so important, and this should have been the case forever, is I think that you need to use common sense.
Yeah.
Right? Like when you go somewhere, like I had no problem in Florida. There were times when I was in a space and there weren't many people wearing masks. I have no problem wearing my mask. Like you know what I mean? Like I'm like, I don't care if nobody else is. Like I'm wearing my mask. I'm going to do what I have to, what I can do.
Well, I think that's part of the problem though, is like I can use all of my own common sense, but the other 30,000 people around me aren't. And so I can't control what they're doing.
Yep.
And I am not comfortable with that.
Yeah. Whereas I'm more comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Like crowds, I wouldn't go to a packed Taylor Swift concert next month. But there are certainly things I would do. Where like I would go to I think I just saw that like the Mariners are opening in person like baseball games with, I don't know, like 25% attendance or something like that. I'd go to a Mariners game. 100%. You know what I mean? Like and have no problem. I'd be safe while doing it. I'd wash my hands all of the time. I would, you know what I mean? I'd wear my mask, totally, all that kind of stuff. But I would still do it. So my comfort level around traveling, I think largely, I feel like I would be pretty open doing most things as far as like a comfort level. But sort of transitioning to the next question, because this is where you and I agree. There are certain places that we just wouldn't want to travel right now.
Right. Not
Not necessarily even because of comfort, but just because of like the experience we'd have.
Right. Yeah. So, that was, I don't, like, we've talked about going to like England. Like that's on our bucket list. That's really kind of the next international trip we want to do.
Totally.
But, looking at England right now, there are very few things that are actually open. And so planning travel, I would like to go somewhere where we can actually do something.
Well, especially when you're thinking about
these big trips.
A bucket list trip.
Right.
Right. It's like, I mean, you want to, and I hate using this term, like you want to feel like you got the most out of your experience.
Right.
And the reality is we live in Alaska. And so when we go to England, it will be a long trip and an expensive trip.
And it's not something we're going to do often.
Totally. It's like we may go there once, twice, 3 times in our whole life.
Right.
Right. And so it'd be nice if the first time we went, we got to do the kind of things that we've dreamt about.
Right.
And so that's one of the things for us. It's not so much a comfort thing around travel, when we're thinking about where we might go, when we might go places, we're really looking at how open is that place? What is there to do there?
Like, I don't want to look back on the trip and be like, that was cool, but, like, that's never what I want my trips to be.
Totally.
And so I would like to be like, that was amazing.
Well, I remember...
End scene.
I remember one thing Auburn said in her video after the Polynesian stay. We stayed there. She was mentioning, like, I think she was answering a question around, like, the value of the bungalow, right? Is the bungalow worth it? And she said something that you've said as well, that it's so hard to judge the value of the bungalow based on when we stayed.
Right.
Because some of the things that would make that experience, I mean, genuinely unbelievable, weren't going on.
Right. And yeah, that was kind of my thing with staying at the bungalow. Like, it was an amazing experience, and I loved it. Like, the bungalow itself was so cool, and I loved how close it was to everything, and like it was a great experience. But one of the really, like, main attractions of staying at this bungalow and paying all of this money to stay at this bungalow is because you can sit on your deck and watch the fireworks from Magic Kingdom, which were not occurring.
Yeah, and so I think about, like, that example in lots of other things.
Right.
Right. It's like you went to Paris, but you couldn't go to the Eiffel Tower because it was closed and you couldn't get close, right? Or you went to, and so, like, I think of all of that kind of stuff when I'm thinking of travel, and it's like, man, it'd be great to be able to have a full experience in these places.
Yeah.
So when we're thinking about probably Europe, because Sherry mentioned this, that I do think that England, Wales, UK is going to be our next international trip, most likely. I wouldn't go there right now, not because of comfort, just because I feel like it would be a lesser than experience than we would like to have for our first England trip.
Yes, agreed.
What do you think? Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay. So let's talk about other ways, Sherry, that travel may look different for us.
Well, I think because now that we're, probably going to stay away from these big city or, high volume attraction kind of things, I think that our travel for at least the next while will be kind of seeking out these small towns, like flying into Seattle, but then renting a car and going out and seeing other small places in Washington State, like kind of getting to explore and experience things that are not Seattle. Like, we're probably just not going to go hang out at Pike's Place Market because it's going to be busy or it's closed. Kind of getting out and, like, seeing these small town places that I think is probably more like what our travel is going to look like.
And that really gets me excited because one of my favorite trips that I've done in the last few years was when I had that month-long sabbatical and I went on my, like, West Coast road trip. Yeah. Because I went to towns that never would have been on my list. Right. And I went to places that never would have been on my list. And just, like, memories that I loved so much, but I loved them because they were these, like, hidden gems. Like we were talking about earlier, they're these amazing things you find along the journey. And I think exactly. So for us over the next season, and again, when I say season, who knows?
That's a question mark. Right?
It's a question mark. I think that, like, that's the reality for a lot of us when we look back at what we've experienced the last year. Maybe it's the rest of 2021. Maybe it's this year and next year. Maybe by this fall something's changed and we'll be in London, right? Like, I literally have no idea. Right. But yeah, I think that smaller towns, road trips, that kind of stuff where we can go at our own pace in our own way, are probably what we're going to be doing.
Right, and in places that just don't have a lot of people.
Yep, that's right. Yeah. And I'm actually really excited about that.
Me too, actually.
Because I think, again, I know I talked about it earlier, but, like, Melbourne, Florida was such a good example of this to me. Like, I think most people, when they're planning, like, a Florida vacation, they're probably not thinking of Melbourne, Florida.
Well, right, and Desi said something. Desi actually is from Florida, and she said...
Which, by the way, she lets us know every time Florida comes up. Did you guys know I was born in Florida? It's like, oh my gosh.
But she said something that, like, she was asking Adam how his trip was, and Adam had asked if she had ever been to Melbourne, and she said that it was something, like, it was a place that she had never driven to. She'd always driven through.
Totally.
And, like, so she had heard of it, but she had never really stopped and explored because it was just, like, another small town in Florida, and who cares?
So, but
she was like, oh, but, like, it kind of sounds cool, like, now that you're talking about it, and, like, yeah.
Wouldn't it be cool, like, if travel for the next season was, like, that's what we want to explore? We want to explore the places that we drive through.
Yeah.
You know, like that. That's what we want to explore, the places you drive through.
Yep.
But I do think that it's possible to do some traditional things that you love in a more comfortable way. And it probably gonna start to sound like a broken record. I'm gonna use Disney as an example. Neither Sherry nor I right now are comfortable going to Disney parks. And that's for a lot. Like, for me, that's for a lot of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's the crowds. For me, it's also there's just like, I'm not stoked on some stuff that Disney's been doing. And so, like, there's a lot of reasons for that for me. But I am so stoked on, like, resort hopping vacations.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to spend a day with Auburn and Emma. And I felt like I had a Disney day. Yet the vast majority of the day, there was nobody around us.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, no crowds, just nobody really around.
Mm-hmm.
Yet I still got Disney.
Right.
And so I think that if you're somebody who's listening to this and you're like, man, like, my comfort level isn't back yet as far as, like, doing Disney World and crowds and all that kind of stuff. But I miss Disney. Like, think of ways that you could do those things in a different way.
Yeah.
Because it is possible.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can get the Disney magic and not the Disney crowds.
Yes.
And I love that.
Yes.
Sherry Beth.
Yeah.
Are there other ways that travel might look differently? I'm trying to think if I've forgotten anything that we talked about. And I think that was pretty much it, right?
I think that's pretty much it. I think we sort of talked about, I don't know if this is on your list, but for me personally, in the next however long, I am not comfortable, like physically comfortable, traveling at all.
Because of the health stuff you're experiencing
because
right
of
now.
the health stuff that I'm currently experiencing.
Yep.
So I am getting better, but I'm not better.
Yep.
And for me, like...
Yeah, you doing even a short flight in Alaska, like an hour-long flight, you'd be miserable.
That still sounds terrible to me. And so, and, you know, it's an actual physical comfort thing. Like, my skin is not to a place where I can squeeze myself in these little tiny airplane seats for any amount of time and be remotely comfortable. And so that, like, the thought of that just really sounds terrible to me.
Well, but not even the travel there, because once you get to a place, like, the goal is to do stuff.
Right, yeah.
You know, and it's like, I mean, going out and walking around Sitka or Ketchikan or walking, you know, through Juneau or any of that kind of stuff.
Right, yeah.
Like,
my biggest adventure was this past week. I actually went to the post office in Walgreens, and I was exhausted when I got home.
Exactly.
Like, I literally went to the post office and to Walgreens and then came home, and I was done for the day.
So I think that's one of the things, I'm glad you brought that up, that travel may look differently for you just because...
I cannot right now.
You can't right now.
Right.
So what does that mean for me?
Right.
Well, we don't know. We're still talking about that.
Yeah.
You know, I do feel the need this summer to travel Alaska.
Yeah.
Because I think that there's this opportunity with Shop 49th and some other stuff we're launching. Like, I feel like I need to go to these towns to help bring exposure.
Yeah.
And the reality is like, if Sherry can't go, like, it may just be me.
Yeah.
You know? And so... we'll figure that out. Here's the nice thing, and we've learned this from traveling. These towns aren't going anywhere.
Right.
You know, and so, like, if I go to Ketchikan this summer and Sherry's not able to make the trip, like, next summer...
we can still go again.
Yeah,
right?
next summer, Ketchikan is still there.
Yeah.
And the summer after, Ketchikan is still there. And so travel for us is going to look a little bit different. We're just not sure what that will look like yet.
Right.
Because we're waiting to see, like, how the healing process goes and what that looks like.
Right.
So, now, let's talk about practical stuff. Like, when might we travel? What might we go? When Europe, Sherry? When Europe, Sherry?
When Europe. I mean, again, like, kind of what we touched on, like, I think that's going to depend on when things are open.
Yep.
Because I don't want to plan this big trip to Europe and have to sit in our hotel room because there's nothing to do.
Yeah.
Like, you know, that doesn't sound exciting to me. I can sit in a hotel room here in Anchorage.
Yep.
And get the hotel experience, and I don't need to fly to Europe to do that. Like, if I'm going to Europe, I want to be able to see and do Europe.
That's right.
And so I think that's wholly dependent on when things are open and when it's safe to go, I guess.
And I think I just have no desire to, like, speculate and say, you know what, well, I think in spring of 2022 things will be open, so let's book a Europe trip. Because honestly, like, the canceling of one viewer cruise, like, that took a toll on me. And I've never talked about that, but, like, I feel a weight. Even though we didn't cancel it, Disney canceled it. Like, I feel a weight on that. Mm-hmm. I feel actual, like, anxiety and stress at the fact that I don't know if the viewer cruise this year is going to happen.
Right.
if the viewer cruise doesn't happen this year, there is no way we are booking another viewer cruise until all of this is passed and cruises are sailing.
Right.
Right. Like I'm not gonna say, you know what, we're gonna book it for next year. Like I'm done with that.
And let's see.
Yeah. No, I'm done with that. Like it is taking a toll on me. And so for me, like I will book a Europe, like a trip to Europe, a trip to England, when things are open.
After things are open.
Not speculating when they may be open.
Or, booking it and then having to cancel it. I think that was like, and I think we sort of talked about this a little bit too, but like canceling that Fiji trip was so hard because we had booked it and we were looking forward to it. And this was, it was something we were really looking forward to. And then it just all of a sudden, like, we just couldn't. And so, like, that sucked.
Yeah, and I think that...
and I don't want to get my hopes up and be like, well, let's plan it and then hope that it goes because I can't handle that anymore.
No, yeah, I'm done with the whole, like, canceled plans thing. And so I think that, if we have to cancel a viewer cruise, if we have to cancel other stuff we have planned, I'm just not planning stuff.
Yeah.
Like I'm just not planning stuff, and it's like, well, we're just gonna wait.
We're just gonna wait.
We're gonna travel locally around our state where we know things are open. We'll travel to places in the country where we know things are open. We'll do things that we know that we can do. I would hope, just being totally honest, I would hope that 2022 would be a year that we could make it to Europe.
Yeah, like everything's open.
Well, that's one of the things, and I think we talked about this on a podcast recently, or a vlog. I'm historically, Sherry, no surprise to you, I am a hoarder of airline miles.
What?
I know, shocking. I just struggle to use them.
And it's so funny to me because I'm like, why are we hanging on to them? Like they're literally there for us to use.
But Sherry, what if? But one thing that I've taken away from 2020 and 2021 so far is I don't want to wait anymore. Like travel is not guaranteed. And so as soon as things are open, like I cannot redeem those miles fast enough to get us to Europe. Like we are going as soon as things are open.
Yeah.
So friends, there you go. Sherry, any final thoughts, parting thoughts on the whole travel situation with us?
I don't know. It's so hard. And I think 2020, like the fact that we're now a year into this and there's still no like actual end in sight, like things are sort of starting to open, but I also just feel like if there's another surge of cases, like everything's going to shut down again. And so like it's so hard to speculate even at all because who knew that a year ago we would be a year into it and things are still just like, we'll see, like, so even like next year, like a year from now, I don't want to be like, well, probably. I mean, I would assume because we can't assume anymore. Like there's no assumptions ever to be made ever again because we don't know what this is going to look like.
I didn't think it would be 6 months. I didn't think it'd be 10 months. I certainly didn't think it'd be a year.
I think people were panicking. A year ago, I was just thinking like, we have to sit in our house for 2 weeks. What are we going to do?
Right. Now we're a year into it.
And now we're a year into it. Yep. And so like I have a hard time planning ahead for anything right now because I just don't know.
Especially travel,
right?
I think that my last thought would just simply be that while I 100% agree with you and I'm on the exact same page as I kind of just said, there is a part of me that even on this Florida trip was just such a reminder of the blessing that travel is in our life and the way that I know I have and I think you have been wired to be renewed by travel.
Yeah.
Even on a trip like this that I just got back from where like it wasn't a restful trip at all.
Right, you were working.
Oh, totally. Yet at the same time, being in a new city, getting to try a new restaurant, walking around a new flea market, checking out new breweries, like doing new things in a new place was like life-giving.
Yeah.
And it was just a reminder that like, man, travel is a gift in my life and I miss that gift.
Right.
And so I'm excited to get back to whatever, again, I hate the term like new normal, whatever, who knows what that means, but I'm excited to get back.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Sherry.
Yeah.
2 questions. Here we go. Your least favorite part of every LeggLife podcast.
I know, but I was thinking about it and I have an answer.
What?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
So here's the questions, you guys. Hopefully you know them by now. The questions we end every podcast are, who is someone that has been inspiring to you lately? Or what is something that has been bringing you joy?
Yeah.
So you have an answer.
I do.
I've got to hear it.
I know. I have yet to have like the inspiring thing.
Every time it's a person.
It's always a joy. It's always a joy. It's always a joy
That's
for
right.
me. And it's not because I don't have inspirational people in my life. It's just
The takeaway from the podcast: Sherry hates people. Big takeaway.
Well, no. So the thing that's finding me joy or bringing me joy, is my improvement. I think.
Yeah.
Yep. Over in my health stuff, like I feel like for so long it just seemed like this never-ending road, and I can't even tell you how many times I just completely broke down and was like sobbing, and like Adam had to sit there through most of them, and I was just like, this is never gonna end. Like, this is my life now, and it's miserable and it's awful and I hate it, and and I am actually improving, and so for me, like, I don't know where that light at the end of the tunnel is. I don't know how far away it is, but I can see it.
Yeah.
And that's bringing me joy because it was really, really hard for a really, really long time.
Because for 3 months there was no light.
There was no light at all. It was just a black hole of miserable.
Yeah.
And so now, yeah, like, I mean, that light is way far away, but it's there.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow, what a good one.
Thanks.
So mine, sticking with the theme, is a person.
Oh.
And it's a person who, a week ago, actually, we're recording this on Friday. So I met this guy 1 week ago tomorrow night. Oh. A week ago, I didn't know this guy existed. His name is Joe. And I don't know if I told you this story, Sherry.
I think you told me about him.
It was at the festival on a Saturday night. And we have this time at these festivals, it's kind of it's prayer time, right? There's prayer and response time. And it's one of my favorite moments of every festival because I love watching. I'm an emotional guy. Most of you guys will know that. Like, I'm a super emotional guy.
It's one of my favorite things about you.
I have no problem crying. I have no problem accessing that kind of stuff. I think that emotions are incredibly healthy. And so I love that moment because it's so filled with just emotion. Mm-hmm. And I was right down in front of the stage, and I was kind of looking around during this time, and I'm looking for like the I mean, for lack of a better term, like the God moments. And right up front of the stage, there was this young girl. I'm going to say she was a teenager, and I don't know how old. I'd say, 18, 19, that kind of thing. And what caught my attention, and I was probably 10, 12, 15 feet away from her. What caught my attention were her eyes, because she wore all of her emotion in her eyes. But it wasn't that she was sobbing or had like tears streaming down her cheeks. It was just that her eyes were welled up and she was so happy. Like there was no sadness. It was just like joy in her eyes. And I saw the sparkle like of the stage lights in like the tears in her eyes. And I was just like, I was mesmerized. And I saw what was happening. There was this guy who was talking to her, and he was an older guy, probably like grandfather age. And he was just being so like just sweet and tender with her, just so like caring in that moment. And I could not peel my eyes away from the interaction from this old guy and this young girl who was experiencing something really powerful. And I watched the entire interaction, for a number of minutes. And as soon as it was over, this guy walked right by me. He was leaving. And I grabbed him by the shoulder and I said, hey, I was like, just so you know, I've done these with the Palau Association for a long time. I've done a lot of these festivals, and I have never, in all of my years doing these, in all the festivals I've done, I've never witnessed a moment that, to me, was more like divine than what I just saw. Like, that was the thing that I will never forget the rest of my life, because it was like I was watching this holy moment. And it was crazy because this guy's name was Joe, and as soon as I told him that, he just like buckles over with tears and just like starts like sobbing, because it was the kind of thing that you could tell that he knew that what he just got to experience with her was really special. And hearing me kind of confirm that to him wrecked him in like a really beautiful way.
Right.
And so Joe gives me the biggest hug and asks me my name, and we talk. And I didn't know who Joe was. Apparently Joe was like a business guy who's a big supporter of the festival and owns like some really well-known things in that part of the state. But in that moment, he wasn't successful business guy Joe. He was this like really tender-hearted person who was just like being present in this like holy moment with this girl who was clearly experiencing something really special. And it was just one of those things that every time I saw Joe the whole rest of that weekend, it just like brought instant joy to my life, instant smile to my face. And I have thought about that moment 100 times over the last week about how special it was to watch and how special it was to experience. And so Joe, who I didn't know existed a week ago, is 100% the person who's inspiring to me, because it was so beautiful to watch her response, but then it was so beautiful to watch his responses. He just was overcome with emotion because of how special that was. And so Joe 100% is my inspiration this week.
That's awesome.
It was so cool. I've done a lot of these, and that is the one moment that I will. It was one of those moments that's like, this is why we do this.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like for her, like that teenage,
the crazy wind and the ups and downs of the whole festival, like everything was worth it.
Everything was worth it because of that moment. Right. Like to me, that was it. Like the flight to Florida, even the anxiety I felt being away from here when like I knew you weren't feeling well. Everything about it like felt kind of confirmed watching that special moment happen. So there we go.
There you go.
Sherry.
Yeah.
Our 12th podcast episode.
Not a baker's dozen, just a regular dozen.
Just our regular dozen. I'm so excited on the next episode because I don't want to say a baker's dozen. Like every episode leading up to it, I say a baker's dozen. Not on the one that's actually a baker's dozen. Right. So, friends, thanks so much for listening. Yeah. You can connect with us on Instagram. It's at LeggLifeAK. You can connect with us on Facebook. If you didn't know, we are also on the YouTubes.
We are.
That is how most people find us.
YouTubes.
And so you can check us out over on YouTube. It's just LeggLife, LeggLife. Want to give a big shout out to our patrons, our supporters over on Patreon, whose monthly support of us make things like the podcast, things like YouTube, things like all the other stuff that we do possible. So thank you so much to them. You can go check us out on Patreon if you want to support us in that way. And we will see you next week.
Yeah.
With our Baker's Dozen episode, Sherry, right?
Yep.
Bye, friends.